Hey everyone! Time to finally do a discussion that isn't the maps for a bit. I might take a little bit of a break from that series because it has gotten a little repetitive and I don't want the quality to dip too much out of that. So instead, let's talk about something else a little bit. All modes again. So I did a little bit of a video talking about why zones only got a lot more popular, and there were definitely some responses I got to that, which I wanted to talk a little bit about the general consensus. And at the same time, this entire week, I and some other top teams have actually been playing all modes, and I mean all of them, including Rainmaker, because there was an all modes tournament hosted by EBTV this weekend, which I got to play in. We ended up losing, I was with a Dreadringer team, so it was me, Snipes, Delta, and Half. We ended up losing 2-3 to Vanguard, the brand new formed European team, and it was really fun. And I got to practice doing all modes for a while, both with Dreadringer, which is what I ended up going with for the tournament. I didn't really have enough time to learn other weapons for it. And I practiced it a little bit with other weapons, though. On the bit of time I did get, I played some stuff like Splash, Blasters, and even a little bit of V-Brella, but that weapon's not great. Anyway, point being, I've gotten the chance to play all modes for a bit after a few months of only really scrimming on zones only and get to watch a tournament of it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about it, if it's like what I think of it, and for the most part, I haven't really seen anyone say they really wanted to go back to it, but I didn't see people saying it wasn't fun either, so, you know, that's alright. I did get to have some perspective, though, because it is definitely a bit different going back to all modes after playing zones only for a while. And before I get into that, I want to give a little disclaimer about the previous video, which is, first off, all modes definitely still happen sometimes, this tournament being an example of it, but also, like, if there was a Nintendo event, or if a major just, like, felt like doing all modes and had a big prize pot, you'd still see it. And outside of top level, it's very common. I've seen Popgun talk a little bit for low ink, that, like, as long as most tournaments are all modes, then low ink will be all modes, and low ink is the main tournament for anyone not at least a mid-level of play. So, for the most part, this really isn't that common of a thing to see zones only. It's really only the top level play, and I did want to clarify that. But, how did it feel? Honestly, I kind of enjoyed TC a little bit. Tower Control felt like if we changed up the comps a little bit and ran more fight-heavy weapons instead of closer to the zones comps we had right now, it could be interesting. It was still a little snowbally. The maps for it still didn't feel great, but it wasn't, like, I honestly kind of enjoyed it a decent bit. Clan Blitz and Rainmaker felt really bad, though, to me. Mostly just, it felt slower. Even Tower felt a little bit slower after playing zones for a while. I feel like the pacing at a high level is so fast right now, especially if you look at, like, the King's Cup zones casting and how stuff went over there with how Japan's played, which, you know, currently a little bit better. The pacing of it is really fast, and you can definitely feel that drop off when you switch to the other modes at this level. And at the same time, I think I get a better understanding of why there is such a difference in vibe from them, and it's really just to do with the objective. I think Zones is the only mode where the objective is kind of not as used sometimes. Like, for the majority of these games, if you're actually looking at it, there's not really much of a focus on the zone at all, it's just outside of it, and that allows the gameplay to be a lot faster. And for the other modes, I think that the objectives really only serve to slow the game down, even at their best. Like, picking up the Rainmaker is still going to be slower, standing on tower is going to be slower, and making plans for a power climb is going to be slower. And while painting zone is definitely something that slows the game down a little bit, I feel like for the majority of the match, not having to worry about it is a bit of a plus. Now, I'm not saying this necessarily is a bad thing that, like, the other modes are completely screwed with, but I will say, I definitely feel like the game is less built around it. More or less fun, I would say. It got me thinking a lot about the most enjoyable experience I've had on the other modes in this game, which is still to this day, the Rainmaker challenge that they did, where they super buffed the Rainmaker, and I know that was a bit overkill, and I said it in that video, but I still find that to be much more fun, and I think even Splatoon 1 Rainmaker had that vibe where it really felt like what you were picking up is a super weapon, and I think in the attempt to balance Rainmaker a little bit, the main weapon just kind of doesn't feel as great to use. You can still make some plays with it. It can still happen. But, like, it doesn't really feel as broken as it used to. Part of that might be people getting better at the game. Part of it might be the main weapon itself, and we really just didn't get to see that through Splatoon 2. Part of it might just be the maps making the other modes worse as well. So that could be it, but I did, like, end up playing and, like, using Rainmaker a bit, and just in general feeling, man, I wish there was more to it. And that's the same thing when I was on, like, I saw Tower. Pencil mostly has to deal with riding Tower in this case, so it wasn't as much of something I noticed, but the few times I had to ride Tower, I was like, damn, there's not really a whole lot to do here. That kind of sucks. And then I guess Clams is where this gets a little bit different. I think Clams has a good idea to try to split up the objective among multiple people. So that's like an interesting way to make it so that it's less direct. And picking up Clams is also much faster than the others. I think Clams is more the game itself. With how many deaths and fighting are happening, it's really hard to get a lot of Clams for a push, especially when the baskets are really far apart. Like this map here, Scorch Clams, with the baskets being as close to mid as they are, I felt like this actually felt fine. Like this or Mako Clams, etc. They can be a little, like snowbally, like if you full wipe on a push, the other team counter pushes immediately. But I'd much rather have that than something like Barnacle or Umami, where it feels like it takes forever to get to the other side, and sometimes there just aren't any scores. But on the Clam Blitz maps that were like a little bit closer with the baskets, honestly, I did feel like it was like pretty enjoyable. In fact, I'd say the Clam Blitz maps with the baskets closer to middle were probably the most enjoyable part out of all modes for me in general. I really enjoyed it. So, for the most part, it has definitely gotten me thinking. I got some comments asking me about it. I really do hope we get an update to some of the modes in this game. Or maybe not in this game, it probably has to be a Splatoon 4 thing, to be honest, because the maps also contribute to it pretty heavily. But I would love to see a bit more overhauls when it comes to these modes. I'd like to see the Rainmaker as a main weapon buffed, and maybe lower the timer you could hold the Rainmaker to 45 seconds or 30 seconds like in the challenge. I'd like to see Tower's special advantage reworked so that we can make Tower fun to do. I still like the idea of making it a mini Salmon Run cannon or something, like something good. And I think Clam Blitz is still just like a basket placement. I think better maps where it'll be easier to push to the basket, and baskets not being like so far back in spawn might be all the mode really needs. But I don't think all of these are going to be like changes that are really seen as much right now. But it did definitely make me see the difference between zones and the other modes a little bit more. And I did kind of, if anything, I think while I appreciated what the other modes did well a little bit more, I ended up coming out of it with like, damn, yeah, zones only really does still kind of work pretty well. And I've been enjoying it a little bit more, to be honest. My personal stance is something I tried to keep out of that video a bit until the end. But for the most part, I think I still stand with the opinion that I've been enjoying it. I did see a lot of comments talk about something I wanted to address real quick, though, which is that Zones is filled with, like, special cheese. And I could see that, like, 2 months ago, when people were playing a bunch of Neo Splashes, and I know I probably contributed to that a little bit since I played Red Ringer, though I am in favor of special power ban on Zones, just saying. However, I don't think that's really the case anymore. I think that the Zones meta is now pretty clearly landed into, like, Stamper, Mint, or Bucket is 2 out of 3 of your weapons, or Dooley are 2 out of 3. And then the main supports have been V-Splash, the, the crab one, and V-Shot. We saw 0 Neo Splash in top 8 of the most recent King's Cup tournament for Zones. 0! There was like 1 T-Tech player, that was it. Which was really surprising, but I think it really does speak to the fact that, like, the meta has been moved more aggressively into enabling these kind of main fighting weapons that have evolved over time. It's definitely a bit of a different style to the old midline meta. But it is still very fight-heavy, and these paint-heavy tools, well, not, like, gone by any means. Like, Bucket still has Strike. Stuff like Dread and Dapples I still think are pretty good, personally. But I think saying that the mode boils down to all the Zones cheese is not accurate at all, especially recently. But, like, regardless, I think it's important to note that, yeah, the objective play on Zones really is further away from the zone than that. This isn't to say stuff like Strike Cheese and Slider Cheese aren't a problem, but, like, I don't think it's that big a deal as people were saying. Even outside of that, though, the other modes got cheese, too. I've pointed this out before, but I will say that literally in the same King's Cup I've been talking about, one of the teams that qualified for Rainmaker literally used 396 Gels. 1 Vacuum, 2 Kraken. And, like, there was a bunch of cheese for Rain. There was some cheese everywhere. It's an unavoidable thing, really. And I think outside of old Kraken cheese in Clam Blitz, nothing's really been as game-breaking. So I think that's all I really had to say here. I hope it was fun to get some insights here. I've enjoyed being able to try out some of the other modes again, but it's been interesting to think about for sure. I hope this perspective helps people. I hope it was a good way to communicate things. But yeah, I figure this might be a good little follow-up to the last one, and I'll try to get to the comments a little bit better to talk about more specifics. I'll see you all later.